Good afternoon, good evening, I should say. Buenas tardes. My name is Tabel Reyes. Mi nombre es Tabel Reyes. Es un placer estar con ustedes esta noche. It is a pleasure to be sharing with you today, all the way from New Jersey, many states across. Estoy aquí desde Nueva Jersey, unos cuantos estados, pero es un placer, but it is a pleasure to be with you nonetheless and sharing with you and our parents. At Ace Empower Academy. Now, before we begin, I obviously just want to introduce myself and Elevate Education, who we are as an organization. Quiero primeramente introducir la compañía, quién yo soy para poder comenzar en este taller. Now, let's make sure. All right. So, la agenda de hoy, primeramente, vamos a hablar un poco de Elevate y la introducción a nuestra compañía, de quiénes somos. Después comencemos a hablar un poco de las habilidades de estudio y cómo los niños pueden mejorar el proceso de estudiar, cómo yo como padre puedo ayudar con el enfoque, la retención, la administración de tiempo un poco y motivar, crear metas y últimamente diferentes estrategias de memoria. Y al final tendremos la posibilidad de hacer unas cuantas preguntas y respuestas. Por eso le quiero dirigir a la pantalla. Si ven al sótano, a la mano derecha, le puede dar un clic al chat y ahí puedes hacer las preguntas y tendremos las respuestas al final. Now, tonight's agenda, we're first just going to want to quickly introduce Elevate Education, who we are, what we do, why I'm here today. Then we'll discuss some study skills that we, in terms of, especially now in the remote learning year, what that looks like and how we as parents can help improve and create a home study environment. We'll discuss a little bit on focus and recall and some strategies there. In terms of time management, what I can do as a parent to build that routine and systems in my home. Create some goal setting and motivation and constantly motivate our children more than ever, considering, they are learning and working from home. Lastly, we'll discuss some memory strategies that your children are learning through our program, which is awesome. And then we'll open up for some question and answers. So I do want to direct you to the bottom right-hand corner of the page where you can enter the chat and ask a few questions that we'll be able to address at the end. So now before we jump in, just again, my name is Tabel Reyes. I've been with Elevate Education for the last 4 years. It's been a pleasure just learning and growing with this company. I'm very passionate about. I am a parent, I am a husband, and I have a fifth grader going into the fifth grade. So I know all about being at home, learning with your child while working from home as well, and the challenges that sometimes might face, but also the pleasures of having your kid at home every day, right? Mi nombre es Tabel Reyes, es un placer, soy un padre, soy un esposo y tengo una niña en el que está entrando al 5º grado y nosotros, pues yo sé lo que es tener a un niño aquí al lado aprendiendo en la escuela, pero mientras el padre está tratando a lo mejor de trabajar y hacer las diligencias del hogar, pero como quiera es un placer a tener el niño en la casa todo el tiempo. Now, let's begin. So, a little bit about Elevate. We want to just give you, as I told you, a little bit of rundown. We were created in 2001. We were founded as a research-based company that really wanted to identify and answer the question, why do top students yield top results? Now, we might draw assumptions. It's because my child's really smart. It's because, my child works hard and is a diligent worker. Now, all of that might be true, but we wanted to really create some research around this. So we spent a year with 4,000 students measuring and tracking statistically, seeing a qualitative and quantitative data that identifies the behavior and the study habits and patterns of these students. From there, we were able to identify some common trends where we then saw there were about 13 key study skills. And now the cool thing is we share these skills all over the world. So we're working worldwide now with 1 million students every year. We're in Australia, in the UK, in California now, which is exciting, in New York, where I am based out of. And it's just awesome to really be able to, in Singapore, South Africa, to just share that we know across the world, students are learning the same skills, the foundational skills when it comes to studying. We work within schools, and we'll discuss. Many of your children are part of our program. We're working with the 5th through 8th graders, so it's a pleasure to be able to share with them. In fact, today started the first sessions with them in this virtual setting and this virtual remote learning. We also have one-on-one programs that we work with students across the world, and our goal is to just make sure and provide these additional resources for children and for parents now more than ever. Again, as this is so new to many of us, and our children are learning from home, and we need additional resources to support our children, and that's where Elevate comes in. So hopefully this will be very useful to you, and by all means, please give us the feedback in that chat, anything that stands out. We want to be able to hear from you. Ahora, un poco sobre la compañía de Elevate Education. Nosotros fuimos fundados en el año 2001 como una compañía de investigación, y queríamos ver identificar la respuesta de por qué los mejores estudiantes obtienen los mejores resultados. Ahora, es muy fácil a veces a lo mejor adivinar, pues porque mi niño es muy inteligente, o también uno puede decir porque trabaja mucho, es un buen trabajador, y a lo mejor todo eso es cierto, pero como una compañía queríamos poder contestar esa pregunta con la investigación y con información. Pues nosotros duramos un año completo a hacer con 4,000 estudiantes, identificando las diferentes métodos, estrategias, patrones que el estudiante tenía sobre el estudio, esas habilidades y cómo construían esos hábitos de estudio. Lo que pudimos encontrar en esta investigación es que pudimos identificar 13 habilidades clave al estudiar efectivamente. Ese es el punto para cómo podemos estudiar más efectivo y más eficiente. Just wanted to translate that over in English. And that's part of the goal, really, through these key study skills, is how can our studying become more effective and more efficient, again, especially now while being at home. Ahora tenemos la oportunidad de trabajar con más de 1 millón de estudiantes al nivel mundial. Estamos en una serie de países. Estamos en Australia, en el sur de África, en Singapur, en el estado de Nueva York, bueno, en la región, en California también. Y tenemos, como le dije, en este punto, una de las cosas que aprecio tanto de esta compañía es que niños alrededor del mundo, a nivel mundial, están aprendiendo estas mismas estrategias fundamentales al estudio y cómo crear estos hábitos de estudio. Sus niños hoy participaron en nuestro programa. Y le hablaré un poco más sobre eso al final, pero hoy tuvieron parte de nuestra primera sesión virtual con nuestros entrenadores. So yeah, as I mentioned, I just said it in Spanish, say it back in English, that your children were a part of our program today. And they were learning some foundational skills on time management, which I'll also love to share with you today. Now, one of the first questions, now I do apologize that my image here might have cut off the section of it, but it's talking about the study environment and what that looks like in my home. Now, one of the questions that we receive constantly from parents is, well, now that my child is home and remote, where should most of his or her studying be done? And how can I support that? So I want to walk you through a few tips on how to, on specifically how we can create this study environment. So quiero hablarles un poco del ambiente estudiantil, de cómo nosotros como padres podemos crear este ambiente más conducivo al aprendizaje. Una pregunta que muchos de nuestros padres nos hacen es, ¿dónde debería estudiar mi hijo? Bueno, quiero darles unos cuantos consejos si la posibilidad está ahí de cómo podemos crear esta estructura. Primeramente, firstly, one of the key things is to make sure that our child is sitting at a desk or a table. Now, I know if you're where I live, it's almost impossible to have a desk. Many of ours, for instance, in New York City, to have a desk is a luxury. But if you have an opportunity of perhaps having a kitchen table or a dining table, it's key to make sure that our children have that workspace where they're up straight. They have that proper posture and can really contribute to being a little bit more attentive and focused on their work. If your child is anything like mine, loves being on the floor sometimes, just throwing on the floor and reading, or on the couch or in bed. Now that's great on occasion. If you're reading for leisure, that's cool and all. But if we're talking about effective studying, and efficient studying, the idea is to make sure that we probably are in proper posture, sitting up in a most energetic state. I mean, I don't know about you. I can read just for a few minutes in bed and then I'm ready to fall asleep. So the idea is, if and when it's possible, let's make sure that our children are sitting at a desk or a table. They might fight you on it, but let's make sure that we can do everything possible to introduce that routine and that habit, that good habit. Ahora, el consejo es sentarse en escritorio, una mesa. No sé si es la posibilidad donde yo vivo, es casi imposible tener un escritorio. Yo tengo un escritorio tan pequeño aquí, pero muchos de nuestros estudiantes al nivel no tienen ese lujo, pero si el lujo está ahí o si la oportunidad está ahí, es muy importante a ver si pueden sentarse a un escritorio o si no, a lo mejor una mesa de comedor, una mesa en la cocina, porque queremos estar en una postura energética, queremos estar en una posición que nos va a ayudar a enfocarnos un poco más y mantener la atención a las tareas. Si estamos hablando, no sé si sus niños como el mío, mi niña le encanta leer o hacer las tareas en el piso, acostada o a veces tirada en el mueble. Y si es para leer tú sabes, de ligura es algo, pero si estamos hablando de estudiar de una manera más eficaz y eficientemente, queremos hacer todo lo posible a introducir este buen hábito de sentarnos a un escritorio o a una mesa cuando se pueda la posibilidad. Ahora, the next tip, if possible, keep the location consistent. Now, what I mean by this, if your child, for instance, has that one desk, we want to make sure that routine is being built, that this is where that child is studying, this is where the child is doing their academic work. Many times there's actually something even cognitive about it, where the child, when they revert back to that same position where they might have learned something, if they're being tested on that subject or on that content, because given their location that they had studied that information, it makes it easier to recall information. So we want to make sure that we keep that consistency, right? Our children deal so well with consistency, routines. So if possible, try to keep that location consistent, and it gives them that sense of schedule. Many children, when they're back in school, they have that idea that they have that same common desk where they're learning at, and they have a structured environment. So as parents, how can we replicate a structured environment at home? That might be one of the ideas, is really being able to keep a location consistent as to where your child might be doing some learning. Ahora, el consejo, si es posible, mantener el lugar consistente donde el niño está aprendiendo. Sé que a veces no es siempre posible, pero si esa oportunidad está ahí, queremos tratar de mantener el lugar de estudio consistente. Hay algo también que nos hace con el cerebro y recordar información. Si estamos en el mismo lugar donde aprendemos esa información, estudiamos la información, ahora cuando viene el examen o la prueba, se hace más fácil a recordar esa información, porque el cerebro tiene esa conexión de a donde aprendió esa información, ahora para poder recordar esa información. Los estudiantes muchas veces cuando están en la escuela tienen esa estructura. Muchas de sus clases académicas están en la misma aula, se sientan muchas veces en el mismo escritorio. Por eso también queremos todo lo posible poder replicar esa idea de consistencia dentro de nuestro hogar cuando se refiere a lo académico. Now, the third tip is keeping that surface area clean, that area that we've dedicated to work. We want to make sure that there are no distractions, that it is a clean work environment for our children. Now, again, if your child is anything like mine and you'll see everything and anything, they'll grab a pen and start clicking it, a water bottle, start tossing it over. As many things, anything seems more interesting than perhaps something academic or studying. So we want to make sure that these distractions are removed and there is a clean working space when possible. We don't want any grease stains, right, on our work. Ahora, el tercer consejo es poder mantener la área limpia de donde el niño y organizada donde el niño está estudiando y aprendiendo. Si su niño es como el mío, la idea de distraerse en todo lo que puede ver que no tiene nada en relación del estudio, agarra un lapicero, comienza a jugar con el lapicero, comienza a jugar con la botella de agua. Queremos asegurar que el espacio donde hemos dedicado al estudiar esté limpio. Ahora, otro paso de cómo mi niño retiene información. Another question that sometimes comes up is how exactly does my child sometimes retain information? How do they absorb that? So I want to walk you through a few steps when it comes to focus and when it comes to recalling information. That first is all about attention and ensuring that we have that attention. And I know that's probably one of the most challenging thing, but that's why it's the first thing. In order for us to absorb any content, any information, for instance, you might not be listening and not be paying too much attention, so you might be missing some valuable stuff that I might be saying. So that's the same thing when we're talking about retaining information. The first step is all about attention. Then that information is stored in our short-term memory. Now this is something, where you can recall something very quickly. I might have just said something, you could spew it back out, but the idea is for our students, we want to ensure that most of the information that they're learning is being stored in their long-term memory. And there are a lot of different strategies to really create that transition of short-term into the long-term, which we actually will go over. In fact, we'll go over a little bit at the end, some memory strategies. So now that information is stored into our long-term memory, and lastly, that idea of recalling the information. It's great to have that information in your long-term, but if you can't use that information, it's of no use. So that's really the process that we want to work through when it comes to retaining information. And through our workshop, for instance, our memory strategy workshop, we walk students through that and how do, all the way from the front, what are some effective ways of maintaining attention all the way through the process of recall. So now into Spanish. Ahora, hablando del enfoque y la retención, muchas de las preguntas a veces habla del proceso de cómo retener información mientras el niño estudia. Quiero hablarle rápidamente de los pasos de cómo nosotros absorbemos información y cómo podemos recordar esa información. El primer paso es la atención. La atención es lo más importante. No podemos recordar nada, grabar nada en nuestra memoria si no tenemos el primer paso de atención. Por eso que es tan importante asegurar que nuestros niños tengan las estrategias requeridas y nosotros como padres podamos crear ese ambiente cuando se requiere cómo yo puedo ayudar a mi niño a mantener la atención y el enfoque. Después de tener la atención, muchas veces la información se traslada al corto plazo, la memoria del corto plazo, donde podemos recordar las cosas rápidas y lo que acabamos de escuchar o decir. Y la idea es, el niño que está estudiando, queremos asegurar que esa información que ha entrado al corto plazo se traslada al largo plazo, porque ahí es donde podemos grabar la información. Ahí es donde tenemos nuestra dirección, nuestra, cédula o número de teléfono, lo que sea. Pero ahí es que queremos que el niño tenga esa información académica en lo que está estudiando, el contenido, es que esa información se mantenga en el largo plazo. Y finalmente, recordar esa información, poder usar y aplicar la información que tiene en ese largo plazo, porque de qué bueno de qué bien nos hace tener esa información si no podemos usarla. A través de nuestro programa nosotros tenemos un taller dedicado a cómo utilizar nuestra memoria y proveer algunas estrategias para mejorar el proceso para nuestros niños. Y hablaremos un poco al final y a lo mejor le puede ser de gran uso a usted también. Pero primeramente quiero hablarles de atención y con eso les quiero demostrar un video. Creo que habla específicamente de atención. Quiero que presten atención para ver. Now, this video that I want to show, it just highlights the idea of attention. So I want you to just watch this video very quickly. It's a fun video that we share with the students, but it discusses the idea of attention. So este video es uno de los videos de diversión que hacemos con los niños, pero habla de la importancia de tener atención. All right, ready? Es en inglés y le diré al final lo que, a lo mejor que no pudo entender claramente, le hablaré al final. Pues aquí está.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Why, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
But how did you know?
Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away.
Sorry, madam.
It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you?
¿Notaste los 21 cambios?
And action. Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Well, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
Bueno, that was just a quick video. The students love that video when they watch it. But the idea is, it just highlights the importance of, like, did you pay attention? Were you paying close attention to what was being shown? And that sometimes is, the case in many students where a teacher might be sharing some valuable information, and their attention is diverted, or they're not fully engaged in that lesson, and they'll miss some of the most valuable and most important things. Which is why it's so important, again, to address this of how to boost this attention. And one of the biggest ways is removing certain distractions. So ese video, no sé si pudieron entenderlo, pero era para demostrar la idea de la importancia de la atención y cómo nosotros muchas veces, si no tenemos ese enfoque y la atención, perdemos alguna información. Muchas veces a los niños les encantan ese video, pero es una manera de poder demostrar de qué importante es que nuestra atención esté el maestro, a nuestras tareas, porque muchas veces si no tenemos atención perdemos algunas de las cosas más importantes. Por eso, para poder mantener y aumentar la atención, una de las cosas más importantes es eliminar estas distracciones. So I want to walk you just through a couple tips that you might already be familiar, you might know this. I just want to reinforce this a bit. The first tip is that of no phone while studying. Now, I don't know how many has ever happened to you. You have your phone in your pocket and you thought you hear a buzz and you look at it and you say, oh, it was nobody, no one texted me or called me. So look at that quick distraction with nothing really happening. So imagine if your phone is actually on and you get a ping and all of a sudden it's a text, or then you look at the text and then you look at Instagram, you flip over to Instagram, and then someone from Instagram has another link to a video on YouTube, and all of a sudden you end up those 30 minutes that your child might have dedicated to study ends up being on social media the entire time, or distraction, texting the group chat the entire time. So that's why it's very key, it's very important to make sure that this distraction of the cell phone, which might be so hard for us, is removed from that equation. If we're talking about perhaps silencing the phone, or trying to have a verbal contract with your child, saying, hey, look, for the next minutes that we've dedicated to studying, the phone is going to be in this location. We could have some structured breaks where you can go back to the phone, but when it's time to study and apply, when I've identified this is my time to study, it's my time to do academic work, I have to make sure that these distractions aren't there for us. For many of us, the distraction might be right in front of you, so you can already know how important that cell phone might be. Ahora el celular es el primer consejo, de mantener, si es posible, no usar el teléfono durante el tiempo de estudio, el tiempo que hemos dedicado y hemos decidido, este es mi tiempo para comenzar a estudiar. Muchas veces, no sé si le ha sucedido, donde escuchan, piensan que fue el teléfono, miran el teléfono, no era nada. Imagínense, eso era una gran distracción y nadie te mandó un mensaje, no era nada. Pero en realidad, la distracción, si en realidad alguien te mandó un mensaje y miras el mensaje, después a lo mejor entra a otra red social, entra a Facebook o entra a Instagram. Después de Instagram llega uno a la página de YouTube y en YouTube está viendo un video de unos gatos en una bicicleta o algo, no sé. Pero la idea es que esa distracción está ahí y muchas veces toma el tiempo completo que hemos dedicado a estudiar o a hacer algo académico. Pues por eso es tan importante, si es posible, remover esa distracción del teléfono, a lo mejor ponerlo en otra habitación, o a lo mejor poner el teléfono en silencio, y usted a lo mejor si puede tener una conversación con el niño, un contrato verbal, si es posible, a decir, mira, el tiempo que hemos dedicado al estudiar, el teléfono va a estar en tu habitación o va a estar a la mesa mientras... El punto es, queremos asegurar que es todo lo posible a remover esa distracción del teléfono, porque muchas veces no puede ser de gran detrimento. Ahora, otra distracción, another tip, is no TV while studying. This might be a little bit obvious, but you'd be surprised how many might want to have that TV on, how many students, want to try to multitask. In fact, we're not great multitaskers at all. Science has proven that we're not great multitaskers. So our goal is to have our dedicated focus and attention to the academic work, the time that we've decided to study, this time that we've decided to do academic work. It wasn't time for television. There's a time and place for everything, which we'll discuss in our time management section. But the idea is we want to make sure that distraction is being removed. In fact, some studies show that your brain produces less waves watching TV than when sleeping. So think about that. Your brain is working more while sleeping than watching TV. So we want to make sure that we avoid watching a show while, or whatever it might be, while studying, especially the time that your child has dedicated to or has stated that's the time they're going to do their academic work. Ahora, el segundo consejo a lo mejor es un poco obvio, pero la idea de no tener la televisión prendida o puesta es tan importante porque es una gran distracción que también la ciencia está probado que afecta las ondas del cerebro que está produciendo, que en realidad el cerebro trabaja más cuando está durmiendo que mientras está viendo la televisión, una pantalla. Pues es tan importante el tiempo que el estudiante ha dedicado al estudiar que no tengamos esa distracción. Hay sonidos, hay palabras, todo que nos puede distraer, hay visuales que nos puede distraer y perder nuestro enfoque del estudio. Hay un tiempo para todo y por eso que la idea de administración del tiempo está ahí. Hablaremos un poco de eso. Ahora el tercer consejo, the third one, is try to limit interruptions. I know that might be a little bit challenging as a parent sometimes, where you want to interrupt or the neighbors are coming over. Regardless, I think it's very important as parents. Maybe I can't necessarily assist my child academically in certain areas, but what I can do is ensure that environment. One of them is limiting interruptions. Maybe if it's another sibling, it's perhaps trying to manage that, or as I mentioned, make sure that we know the time. Okay, I know my neighbors can't come over at this time. I know I, for instance, can't be of interruption. I shouldn't have the TV on in one room loud while my child has dedicated time to study, or I shouldn't have music on, or maybe I'm on the phone. We have to be very mindful of the constant interruptions. Our goal is to create that structure, create these habits and routines for our children. So if we're constantly interrupting them when they're getting a good flow, it's going to be that much more difficult to go back and regain that flow and that momentum that child might have built at that time. So us as parents, we have to play our part and identify, what am I doing on occasion that can interrupt my child and disrupt them from their academic learning. Ahora, el tercer consejo es tratar de limitar las interrupciones. Es tan importante que nosotros como padres estemos al tanto de que yo a lo mejor estoy haciendo que no está contribuyendo al enfoque de mi niño. A lo mejor estamos hablando y constantemente al niño. A lo mejor tenemos la música puesta o la televisión prendida en otra habitación o el vecino está en nuestra casa. Tenemos que ser como padres, es nuestro deber. A lo mejor no todo el tiempo podemos ayudar en lo académico, no le podemos ayudar en la tarea o en el estudio, pero lo que sí podemos hacer es controlar muchas veces el ambiente. Si la posibilidad está ahí, cómo nosotros podamos limitar esas interrupciones que tienen, si el niño está en el proceso y está enfocado y de repente tenemos una interrupción, lo va a hacer mucho más difícil para que el niño regrese a ese enfoque que tenía anterior. Pues como padre les animo, por favor, estén muy al tanto de que yo como padre estoy haciendo a no distraer y a limitar las interrupciones. And the last tip number 4, is trying to block out background noise. It kind of connects with the idea of interruptions. But I know many students, for instance, like to listen to music, and I'll discuss that next in the next slide. But we want to make sure that we could create an environment where there isn't as much background noise. So if we're guilty of creating that background noise, parents, I really urge you to just be mindful of it and making sure that we're again trying to create that conducive learning environment for our children. Ahora, el cuarto consejo es bloquear esos ruidos y sonidos del fondo. Sé que muchas veces nosotros somos culpables de hacer eso, pero tenemos que estar al tanto y muy atentivo a esa idea de cuáles son esas interrupciones, esos sonidos, ese ruido que a lo mejor está distrayendo a mi niño al estudiar. So, which is why I actually want to talk a little bit about how to do that, blocking background noise. Music can sometimes help, and I want to also emphasize that not always. There's certain music that will not be beneficial. For instance, if your child loves, let's call it like whatever music, but nonetheless, especially music with lyrics. Think about that. While your child is reading words, perhaps writing some words, is now listening to words. So these concepts, that's going to be a clear distraction to the child. I don't know has ever happened to you, but it's definitely happened to me where I'm writing something and something I'm listening to, I end up writing exactly what I just heard. So that can really be disruptive to the child's learning and retention and focus. There are certain apps though. There are free, for instance, here Study app. It's a white noise app, so that background noise that sometimes can help you focus a little bit. It's there for you, and it's free. You could even also YouTube study music, and I guarantee you, I've actually used it all the time, all the way from college now, 11 years later. It's free, and it's some that have 3-hour playlists. I'm not saying they're going to study for 3 hours straight, but that music actually helps focus and maintain productivity. There's a lot of science behind that. So para los padres, it's free and yeah, it's scientifically proven to block out background noise. Música a veces, para poder bloquear, muchas veces el niño quiere escuchar música y eso es todo, eso es bien, pero muchas veces la música puede causar hasta más distracciones, porque aunque a lo mejor estamos bloqueando los otros sonidos y los otros ruidos, lo que estamos haciendo es introduciendo una nueva distracción. Y si lo piensa, a lo mejor cuando el niño está estudiando, está leyendo palabras, están escribiendo palabras y ahora están escuchando palabras. Yo sé que hasta me ha sucedido donde estoy escribiendo algo y si estoy escuchando música con líricas o palabras, al final del tiempo llego a escribir algunas palabras que estaba escuchando. Pues por eso es tan importante que estemos al tanto de la música que estamos escuchando, porque nos puede servir de gran distracción. Como le dije, hay un tiempo para todo y muchas veces para poder, si quiere escuchar la canción más reciente de Bad Bunny, no es el tiempo durante el estudio. Hay algunas alternativas, hay algunas aplicaciones se llama sonido blanco y es como, tú sabes, o música como del fondo, que si uno lo piensa son como sonidos, no son palabras, no son líricas, y uno hasta puede entrar a YouTube y entrar música de estudio. Hay muchas diferentes playlists que uno puede descargar y escuchar. Yo la uso todo el tiempo y me ayuda a mantener el enfoque y la productividad, y esa es la idea. Para el niño que dice, bueno, no quiero escuchar música, hay algunas alternativas. Algo aquí es una aplicación que se llama Study app, es gratis y ha sido científicamente probado para poder bloquear y remover la distracción del ruido al fondo con diferentes sonidos que como científicamente, como le dije, ayuda a la productividad y el enfoque. All right. Now, another idea when it comes to focusing and creating this, this conducive learning environment is breaking the work up. Now, a child might be overwhelmed. Let's say it's a big homework assignment or a test to study for. We want to make sure that we can really create some structured breaks. Now, here it says a 45-minute block. Now, if you know your child better than I will do, I would say that would be the max. If you could break it down, something maybe 30 minutes might be a little bit better than a quick little break. But that's the idea of making sure that we're creating some structured breaks for our child. I don't know about you. It's challenging for me as a working adult to stay on task for 45 minutes straight. I do need that break. I need to get up and walk and stretch my legs. I need a little coffee. So the idea is, can we create that structure as well? Growing up in a very Caribbean, Dominican, conservative home, my father had me at the table, me and my sisters, for hours and hours. We couldn't get up till we read for however long. So structured breaks didn't occur to us. So I do want to emphasize the importance of creating some structured breaks for your children. Ahora, uno de los consejos es tratar de mantener los intervalos de estudio. 45 minutos es lo máximo. Yo diría, yo sé que a lo mejor es menos, hasta lo más joven que el niño es, como si está en el 5º grado, a lo mejor es 25 minutos seguidos con un descanso de 3 a 5 minutos después a regresar. Es la importancia de mantener esa energía con el niño, porque no sé cómo si ustedes, pero para mí me hace muy difícil mantenerme al escritorio haciendo, tú sabes, trabajando y enfocado 45 minutos corridos sin tener un receso, sin a lo mejor una taza de café o una merienda o algo. Pues por eso también nosotros queremos tratar de crear algunos descansos estructurados y algunos intervalos. A lo mejor es 5 minutos de receso. Ok, puedes usar tu teléfono o mirar un video o algo o mandar mensajes a tus amigos por unos cuantos minutos, pero después que ese tiempo, después podemos regresar. Y esto se conecta. This connects with the second tip, which is that minute, that structured break. A lot of times you want to ensure that there's some physical activity. Now, what do I mean by that? Again, the more we work, obviously our brain is, we're working hard. We might be getting tired. We might be losing momentum. So we want to be perhaps physically active. We want to get the heart flowing. That the heart pumping just a little bit faster, which again will connect with, we're going back to the studying aspect of it. They'll have perhaps a little bit more attention and focus when they are in a more alert state. They're not sleepy, they're not tired, perhaps by looking at the screen for such a long period of time. So in that time, if we're creating a structured break, maybe we can do something physical. It could be something fun. Maybe it's putting on music and just dancing a little bit together. Maybe doing a few jumping jacks, whatever that is. But we want to ensure again that these structured breaks are being productive in a different way. I'm not saying productive academically, or productive in a way that the child is using that brain break to re-energize themselves to going back to their studies. So muchas veces el segundo consejo es, si estamos identificando ese intervalo, ese descanso, queremos a lo mejor tratar de incluir una actividad física donde hay el niño está una etapa más energética. A lo mejor es escuchar música, bailar un poco o hacer un poco de ejercicio, jumping jacks, lo que sea, pero la idea es mantener esa energía porque muchas veces es difícil mirar una pantalla por tanto tiempo. Nos puede afectar los ojos, nos puede afectar la energía, nuestro cuerpo. So, si estamos dedicando y hemos identificado el descanso estructurado, queremos tratar, si podemos, incluir algo físico que pueda crear más energía al niño. Now, the third one, and again, this all ties in fact, is identifying a zone of effectiveness. Now, many, I don't know how many are morning people. My sister, for instance, perfect example, wakes up at 4:30 a.m. and is one of the most productive people I've ever seen that early before the sun even rises. But the truth is, many of us have times that work a little bit better for our children. There's science that proves like the younger the child is, the more delayed in the day, the more of their zone of effectiveness might be. So if the flexibility is there when we're talking about academic calendar and structure in terms of how the school has structured the day, maybe it's really trying to identify that zone of effectiveness for your child and when they should be working more effectively. Especially, let's talk about going back to the idea of studying specifically. If your child has a test that they need to dedicate time to study, we want to make sure that that child is studying during that zone of effectiveness. There might be some other work that perhaps might not require as much attention. That's okay to do it outside the zone. But when we're talking about specific work, studying for a test, for instance, we want to make sure that when is this zone, when does it work best? Because that's when I want to make sure that my child is studying. Ahora, el tercer consejo es tratar de estudiar dentro de la zona de efectividad. Todos tenemos un tiempo durante el día donde tenemos más enfoque, más productividad, más energía. Ese es el tiempo donde queremos asegurar que nuestros niños están trabajando académicamente y no haciendo algo a lo contrario, a lo mejor jugando un juego de videos o viendo televisión. Hay un tiempo para todo, pero durante esa zona de efectividad es muy importante que podamos ayudar y tener nuestros niños trabajando académicamente en esa zona para asegurar que específicamente si están estudiando, vamos a decir para una prueba o un examen, si hemos identificado esa zona, a lo mejor es a las 10 de la mañana, no a las 8 de la mañana o a la 1 p.m. en vez después de comer almuerzo, ahí es que queremos tratar de estudiar y tener esa zona de efectividad. Okay, ahora, otra pregunta, right, that we get a lot from our children, from our parents is, and this is a common, I'm sure, struggle, is that idea of time management. So we're going to talk a little bit about the challenges that students face and what we can do about it. ¿Por qué mi hijo tiene problemas con el manejo del tiempo? La administración del tiempo es algo muy, muy común. So trust me, your child is not alone. This is a common issue for not just children, perhaps adults as well. So maybe this could be of benefit to you. Esto es algo tan común que no solamente a los niños, también para los adultos. Ahora, a lot of times why children might not have that habit of good time management many times comes down to not having a plan at all. Muchas veces la idea porque los niños no tienen esa buena administración del tiempo es porque muchas veces no tienen un plan. So la primera idea, el primer paso es los niños no tienen un plan. From there, a lot of students then have these unrealistic expectations of themselves and of time, saying, I have plenty of time. I can do this, that won't take me too long. And then what can end up happening, they'll leave things for last minute and procrastinate everything. So lo segundo, los niños después tienen esas expectativas, no son realísticas. No, yo tengo mucho tiempo, eso solamente me va a durar 20 minutos y eso no es realística, a lo mejor va a durar mucho más tiempo que nos ahora contradice al tiempo que tengamos. So what ends up happening after these unrealistic expectations, we create this unrealistic time schedule for ourselves, this planner for ourselves. I'm going to plan this out. I'm going to be able to do this in the next, hour or so, a project that probably should be dedicated 2 weeks worth of time. They in fact say, I could get this all done within this window. Super unrealistic planner. Los estudiantes crean este planificador que no es realista. Dicen, bueno, yo tengo lo puedo acabar todo en 1 hora, a lo mejor un proyecto que iba a durar 5 o 6 horas, y el estudiante crea este planificador que no es realística, and then what happens, that plan that we've created becomes so difficult to actually stick to, and we're trying our best and we can't do it. Lo que pasa, el estudiante crea este plan que es tan difícil para poder continuar y mantener, y al final del tiempo the plan is then abandoned. At the end of the day, after trying to create this schedule that was difficult to actually stick to and maintain, you end up abandoning the plan and just saying, I'm just gonna wing it. I'm just gonna go with it, especially when it comes to studying. I didn't have a plan effectively, so it's all good. I'm just gonna go with the flow, and then that leads you back to not having a plan. So muchas veces el niño abandona ese plan porque es tan difícil para mantener, no es realística, y al final del tiempo lo abandona y regresa al comienzo donde no tiene un plan. And back to square one with no plan at all. So what can we do as parents to create this effective study routine, this schedule, is actually by creating a plan. So how can we go about creating this plan? ¿Cómo podemos crear este plan que es un poco más realista y nos puede ayudar a mantener la administración de este tiempo? The first thing, how do we create it? Now, tip number 1. Now, this is... I've seen this of great benefit in many of the parents and students that I've worked with over the last few years. Tip number 1 is actually identifying when are you not going to study. Now, I know that sounds, wait, hold on, what? But this is actually going to probably be one of the biggest steps, is identifying, because what we see many times, students say, okay, I want you, trying to create this realistic study planner and for themselves, ultimately say, okay, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. And they try to substitute it with the idea of, okay, I'm just going to study during this time, this day. And it ends up being super unrealistic because they're removing these things where their mind is going to be on, where they want to focus on, and they abandon that plan within, a week, 2 weeks worth, and they can't even stick to it, crumble it up and throw it away. So we actually want to reverse the process. And the first thing we want to look at is, when am I not going to study? Now, what does this mean? For instance, if your child loves a certain show that watches every day, or if your child is any like me that loves the NBA, there's NBA playoffs going on. So clearly, if your child wants to watch these games, guess what? I might not be studying during this time. This is not realistic for me to try to study if I know this game is going to be on. So it's mapping that out, looking at the time. When am I not going to study first? Ahora, then we want to plot this out onto a planner, map it all out during the week. I encourage a weekly activity of doing this. When this is my week, this is my days. What am I going to do? When do I have, let's say maybe it's a sport. When do I have soccer practice here? When do I have, church, for instance, if there is, even if it's virtual, when am I going to be doing that? Because guess what? I'm not going to be studying during that time. When is family dinner, if there is, or family time? Mapping all of the non-study activities first. Then we look at the gaps. We have that schedule that shows all of the things that the kid, your child might want to do, all of the enjoyable things, even if it is watching TV, even if it is playing Fortnite for 2 hours, let's say. But then it's looking at the gaps, and it's filling the gaps in with study and something academic, reading, reviewing, homework. That becomes much more realistic because the idea is, hey, we have everything here. We have a balance. The things that we want to do and the things that we have to do if you want to excel academically. So it's creating a balance and a healthy schedule. So many times, again, I just compare myself, and I'll say all of this in Spanish, I promise. My dad, for instance, cut me off. My sisters and I, we were never allowed to watch TV Monday through Thursday. The only thing we were able to watch is Univision, Spanish news, or the Yankees play baseball. Huge baseball fan. I'm Dominican by nature. So the idea is, though, he removed all that from us, and there was no real balance. And I'm not saying, if it works in your home, but the idea is, how do we create some structure where the child is also enjoying studying, and studying is not looked at as a punishment, because we failed, in my opinion. If our children are viewing studying as a punishment, they're never going to be really excited about it, about learning more, about retaining more information. So what can we do? Create that healthy balance. Now, in Spanish, let's flip it. Okay, ahora, para crear un horario de estudio realística, los primeros que queremos hacer, el primer consejo que les animamos es identificar cuándo no vamos a poder estudiar. Porque muchas veces el estudiante que quiere crear este plan remueve muchas de la idea. Bueno, ya no puedo ver televisión, ya no puedo jugar videos, ya no puedo usar mi teléfono, todo esto, y trata de crear este planificador que no es realista, y en realidad abandonan ese plan inmediatamente, lo tiran a la basura. Pues la idea es, primero, vamos a identificar cuándo no vamos a ser posible a estudiar. Lo que digo aquí, si al niño le encanta ver un programa en la televisión cada martes a las 9 de la noche, a las 8 de la noche, sabemos que el niño no va a estar estudiando en ese tiempo. O si el niño tiene práctica de fútbol, vamos a decir, los martes y los jueves a las 6 de la tarde, sabemos que a esa hora el niño no va a estar estudiando. O si tiene la iglesia o tiene tiempo familiar, queremos tratar de identificar cuáles son esas actividades que no vamos a abandonar, que queremos a continuar en nuestras actividades semanal. Tenemos esa lista, tenemos estas actividades. Lo segundo que queremos hacer es incluir este tiempo en un horario de estudio. Queremos crear ese horario, pero primero, como dije, incluir el tiempo donde no vamos a estudiar. Si es la cena a una hora específica, si es un programa en televisión, o si es una fiesta, cada semana tratar de hacer esta actividad donde podemos incluir todo lo que no se requiere al estudiar o lo académico. Pero el último paso es poder, ahora ya que hemos identificado donde no tenemos el tiempo para estudiar, queremos ver esos espacios vacíos donde tenemos ese tiempo, y ahí es donde queremos incluir el estudio, el leer, el repaso, porque ahora este horario tiene un balance, tiene las actividades que queremos hacer en la vida, pero también tiene el tiempo dedicado que hemos visto que es el mejor tiempo para poder estudiar. Por eso que es tan importante tener estas conversaciones en el hogar. Having these conversations with your child, sitting them down and mapping this out together is going to be very beneficial to building a routine, building that consistency. Es tan importante tener esta conversación, hacer esta actividad para poder ayudar y crear rutinas, crear nuevos hábitos y consistencia. So what does this actually look like? This is a very, easy way to do it. There are tons of perhaps downloading templates you can do. You could make a big poster in your house, put it on the fridge, whatever might work for you. But you have the days of the week. This is a weekly activity that could be done. You have the times of the day. And then let's build in the routines. What are things that we have, every day? Let's say if it's breakfast every day at 7:30, sure. A structured break. We have lunchtime, helping sister, whatever this might look like. This will be different. Look, Netflix time, dinner time, playing video games, Fortnite. You know what that might work, but then the idea is we look at the gaps, and this is where we want to plug in study. Now, again, this might be a little bit excessive here studying, but I'm not talking about just studying. This might be time where remote learning is happening. I know it says study there, but think about, when does my child, have class? What does that look like? Mapping that out so you have a great idea and understanding, have a balance. Now, again, this is going to look different every week. There's something to remember. This is just a guide, not a rule. So it's something that you want to perhaps try to practice. But guess what? If I can't follow this 100%, that's okay. But the idea is maybe I can follow this 50% of the time. That's 50% of the time that our child has some structure and routine in place. So what I urge, and I really encourage you to do, is map this out with your child. Map it out for yourself. Include maybe family time there together. Include, movie night with my daughter. Free time for yourself. even creating something like this at home for yourself will be beneficial, because you can, like I asked, when was the last time we actually thought about our time, what that looked like? When was the last time we actually mapped out our days and our weeks? So revisiting this, being flexible, also being compassionate with each other and sharing some empathy with our children and with ourselves, knowing that this might be fully impossible to follow every single day when stress is high and all of that. But again, the idea is, how can I build some consistency and routine? Ahora, para lo que se ve como aquí en español, es la idea de tener los días de la semana. Esto es fácil para descargar en el internet. Puede crear uno en un papel, a lo mejor tenerlo a la nevera, tenerlo, tú sabes, una pared o algo. Pero el primer paso es tener los días de la semana, las horas que tengamos. Y aquí es donde queremos incluir las actividades que no requieren el estudio. Si es desayuno, el descanso, el almuerzo, cocinar, a lo mejor cenar juntos, jugar juego video, aquí está Fortnite, o ver un programa en Netflix, algo así. Como les dije, primero aquí es donde queremos incluir las actividades donde no estamos estudiando. Miramos los espacios vacíos y comenzamos a colocar la idea de estudiar. Sé que eso se ve un poco excesivo, que mi niño está estudiando todo este tiempo, pero la idea es aquí cómo podemos crear una rutina. A lo mejor eso es lo que ven ahí donde dice estudiar, lo que en realidad estamos hablando, a lo mejor el día académico, durante el día, si tiene una clase, no sé la estructura específica, pero no solamente es estudiar, es a lo mejor tarea, es clase, es repaso. Le animamos tratar de construir uno así en el hogar, porque aquí podemos incluir cosas familiar, como el tiempo, una cena cada semanal, vamos a decir, o ver una película en familia, o tener un balance para ti también. Les animo a tratar de crear algo similar, no tiene que ser tan específico, pero les pregunto, ¿cuándo fue la última vez que realísticamente comenzamos a pensar de nuestro tiempo y nuestra estructura de nuestro tiempo? Pues por eso les animos a tratar de crear un horario así, para poder ayudar a crear estas estructuras, estas rutinas. Sé que a lo mejor es imposible seguir un horario así al 100%, y eso está bien, pero y si lo hicimos el 50%, eso ahí es algo que tenemos 50% de nuestra semana, hay rutinas y hay estructura. Another question that we get is all about goal setting. Many of our parents, I know now more than ever, it's our children have lost motivation. During the summer, now coming back to school, it might be really difficult to regain that motivation. So I want to walk you just quickly through a couple of steps when it comes to motivating your child. Number one is that starting with the why, and really trying to have your child understand their why. And it's connecting it with perhaps their wants and desires out of life. And one of the things I can use a perfect example, I was working with a student in the Bronx in New York, and he's a huge basketball player and loves basketball, wants to play basketball professionally, but he does not like math. And he's like, I don't understand why I need to even do math. I don't care about math. Like, it has nothing to do with what I want to do in life. It doesn't make sense. But then I sat him down. I started actually kind of helping him understand his why. I was like, look, I understand you want to play basketball. That's great. But if you actually do well in math, you can perhaps understand the game of basketball more. The game of basketball is all about angles, dimensions, different ways, right? So perhaps the better you get at math, that might actually lead you to be a better basketball player. There's also, I had a student that I was working with that he aspired to be a rapper. Professional rapper, and I said great, but he didn't like English, he doesn't like writing essays. And I was like, hey man, the truth is, the better writing you do, the better of a writer you are, the better of a rapper you can become. The more vocabulary you have, the more words you can use, more metaphors you can throw in there. So it's just connecting our children with that why, having that conversation of, many times it might be challenging, especially now more than ever, but really reminding our children, of their why, and trying to have these conversations. What do you want out of life? Let's have these conversations about goals. What is it that you enjoy? What is it that you want to do? And once you can identify that, have a real raw conversation, is then we can connect the academic side of things. Look, I hear you. This is what you want to do. Excellent. What if we did this? Yeah, then the next step, I'm going to run this in English first, en inglés primero y después en español. The next thing is, now that we've identified a child's why, we understand, we have some clarity around that, is actually making some of these goals specific. Not just say, I want to do well in math, I want to do well in English. That's not specific, you know. We want to be, you know, if it's a test, right? Instead of saying, oh, you know, somewhere around the 80s. No, let's say if it's an 88, I need to get X amount of questions right. The clear, it's like driving, you know, the clearer we know our destination, the clearer that path becomes, you know. When you enter it on Google Maps, you know exactly where you have to go. That's the same thing when it comes to goals. If you have these big random goals with no clarity around it, there's going to be no clarity around the plan that you're creating for yourself. You know, linking it to like the gym. Somebody, I want to lose a lot of weight. Awesome. But now let's get more specific. Let's dive a little bit deeper. And that's the same thing when it comes to academic goals and career goals, even for yourself as adults, right? Let's create these specific goals that we can revisit and look at and see how far we've gotten, or how much we've progressed and grown to that goal. Which leads me to the next one, is creating some attainable goals, small victories, especially for our children, little by little. Many times, you know, we create these big, audacious goals, which is great to have, but we don't have these smaller subset goals that are going to lead us there. You know, it's great to have these long-term goals, but it's those short-term goals that are really going to get us there. So it's trying to make sure that little by little, you know, we could create, like, again, going back to that perfect example about losing weight. You know, I'm going to lose 20 pounds this summer. Okay, great. But like, let's start with the week 1. Let's start with 2 pounds. And what am I going to do that, right? So that's the same thing. We want to think about our children. What does that look like? And I think now more than ever, when it comes to goal setting, we have to come from a place of empathy and compassion, understanding it's going to be easy to lose motivation. So we have to always revisit and have these conversations, these constant reminders of their why, these constant reminders of specificity around the goals. And last one, I love this one so much, is that idea of writing down these goals and help visualize it. I can just give you a quick example. And I still remember in high school, I had a classmate that her dream was to go to Princeton. So what she do, she actually printed an acceptance letter from Princeton University, had a big poster, had it in her folder, had it in her binder. She had the Princeton P, the Tigers are, you know, in the mascot in her locker. She would always wear a hoodie. It was that was a constant visual of her goals. And sure enough, she graduated from Princeton. You know, one of the things, with my daughter here, she wants to be a doctor, so we got a little stethoscope, you know, something to help visualize that. She wears a little coat and is very proud. It's how can we help visualize some of these goals, writing them down, maybe making a list, having it publicized, so, you know, in the home, so we can look at it. Hey, you did that, you crossed that off, and, you know, mark a check on that, or, you know, grab a pen and mark it, place a star next to it, something visual that's really going to help maintain that motivation for the child. So what can I do as a parent to help visualize the goals around? What are these conversations I need to have? So maybe it's, you know, I know another parent that her child wants to be an engineer, so they bought a Connect set. And every Friday they build a new model, and they do that together, and they apply engineering strategies in there to build an awesome model. So again, what am I doing as a parent that's going to connect with my child's goal? How can I support them? How can I walk them through different steps? And how can I maintain that motivation high? And I know it may sound hard for us because we might lose motivation. So the same might apply for you in following some of these steps. All right, ahora en español. Muchas veces hablamos de cómo podemos establecer algunas metas, y es difícil porque muchas veces construimos, esta es mi meta, pero no tenemos intención. So, primeramente queremos hablar de comenzar con el por qué. ¿Por qué estamos haciendo esto? ¿Por qué? Que tenemos tratar todo lo posible, tener estas conversaciones. ¿Cuándo fue la última vez que tuvimos una conversación con nuestros niños sobre sus metas? La idea es normalizar la idea de crear metas. We want to normalize this behavior of creating goals. ¿Y cómo nosotros podemos tener estas conversaciones y entender? Le di un ejemplo, un niño que estaba trabajando, no sabía nada, no quería nada de saber de las matemáticas, pero le encantaba el deporte, y yo le estaba explicando que muchas veces al mejorar la matemática, el mejor atleta podemos hacer, porque muchas veces los deportes requieren muchas matemáticas, ángulos de cómo pasar la bola o de cómo moverme en la cancha. Pues la idea es entender el por qué. Les animo a tener esa conversación con sus niños para poder asegurar y entender este por qué. Lo segundo es hacer estas metas específicas. Lo más específico, la más claridad hay en esta meta. Es como al guiar. Si tenemos un destino, sabemos dónde queremos ir, tenemos la intención, sabemos dónde tengo que doblar a la izquierda. Así mismo queremos pensar con nuestras metas. Hacer estas metas tan específicas que podamos medir y revisar y ver dónde yo estoy con esta meta, cuánto me falta para a poder completar esta meta. Si decimos cosas grandes, quiero hacer esto y quiero hacer lo otro, no es específico y necesitamos, si es como en el examen, bueno, yo quiero pasar o no me quiero quemar. Eso no es una meta efectiva porque no va a ayudar, no va a animar, no va a motivar. El tercer paso es hacer estas metas alcanzables. Muchas veces decimos, bueno, a conectarlo al gimnasio, vamos a decir, quiero perder 20 libras y esa en 2 meses, pero en vez de enfocarnos en lo pequeño, tenemos esa mente de la 20 y en realidad, espera, vamos a hablar de esta semana, vamos a intentar a rebajar 2 libras, vamos a ir al gimnasio 3 veces a la semana, tener un plan específico, porque es bueno tener metas y soñar grande, pero con esos sueños grandes tenemos que tomar pasos pequeños y a tener algunas metas alcanzables para nosotros. Ya cuando pude lograr esta, ahora a lo mejor la próxima meta puede ser un poco más, o sea, que me tengo que empujar un poco más. Y el último paso que me encanta porque he visto cómo ha beneficiado mi casa, en mi hogar, es la idea de escribir y visualizar estas metas. A lo mejor muchas veces crear una lista, tener las metas visual, tener imágenes, fotos que se pueda recordar. Un ejemplo que di que tenía una compañera en la secundaria que quería ser aceptada en una de las mejores universidades en el país, pues ella hasta imprimió una carta de aceptación, pero la tuvo siempre en su mochila. Tenía la mascota en su cuaderno también. La idea es cómo yo como padre puedo ayudar a visualizar las metas en mi hogar. ¿Qué yo puedo hacer? A lo mejor es tener una foto en la habitación de mi niño, o a lo mejor es comprarle algo, como un ejemplo que le doy. Tenía una madre que tenía un niño que quería apoyar a su niño a ser ingeniero, pues ella compró, la animé a comprar a lo mejor uno de esos juegos de construir, y ella ahora todos los viernes hace un modelo con su niño y ayuda a mantener esa motivación y esos sueños, esa motivación. Pues desde el comienzo les animo a tener la conversación para poder entender y pensar con el qué, dónde yo quiero y qué mi niño quiere de la vida, cómo yo puedo ayudar y apoyar. Real quick, I just want to talk about centering conversations around celebration and improvement. We want to celebrate all the wins. Even if they're small victories, let's celebrate them. That's going to keep our child motivated and energized. Even if it's, if my child has been getting 65s and they got a 72 today, I'm celebrating that. That's improvement. That's progress. Being able to center all of our conversations around these small improvements, acknowledging that you're getting better. I see you're improving here. You're starting to master this skill, this ability. Even if at the end of the day you might not fully achieve that goal, they're working towards it. They're recognizing, and you have to recognize their effort. And that's the last step, right? Of recognizing the effort over the results. Many times we get drilled on just, the outcome, but it's the effort that got us to that outcome. I can, quickly recall when I was playing baseball, I hit a home run, but I also struck out twice in that same game. It was one of the first time, in high school, my first home run, and my father, rather than celebrating the home run, he's like, you struck out twice. So many times we look at that idea of like, we ignore the effort and we only focus on the outcome, and that could be really demoralizing for a child, especially now more than ever. We have to again lead with compassion and empathy and really recognize efforts, because hey, many times your child did work hard, and we have to motivate them to continue to work hard and not just focus, you didn't do well, you didn't get the A that I was expecting, but hey, I was working towards it. You're putting the effort in. Or sometimes it's acknowledging that hey, you're not applying yourself as much as you should be applying yourself, rather than just focusing on you failed. It's saying, hey, you have so much more potential. You're not, and really recognizing the lack of effort, not the failure, quote unquote. So effort and results, I'm not saying don't celebrate the outcome, especially if you've achieved that outcome. Celebrate that, absolutely, but also equally celebrate the effort that got that child there. Ahora, últimamente es centrar estas conversaciones y celebraciones al mejoramiento. Muchas veces queremos celebrar las victorias cuando ocurran. Si es algo, aunque es una victoria pequeña, si el niño tenía un 65 corridamente y al otro día sacó un 73 en su examen, en su prueba, queremos celebrar porque poco a poco está mejorando. Queremos asegurar que nuestras conversaciones y celebraciones tengan ese centro de conversación, aunque sea, como dije, mejorando un poco. Es algo que podemos ver poco a poco. El niño está mejorando ese proceso. Eso lo va a seguir animar y motivar en vez de solamente enfocarnos en el resultado, que es el último paso. Muchas veces reconocer el esfuerzo más que los resultados, porque eso elimina el miedo de fracaso. Muchas veces somos culpables de solamente enfocarnos en el resultado. No llegaste aquí, no lo lograste y no estamos ni notando el esfuerzo, porque muchas veces no llegamos a nuestras metas porque no tenemos el esfuerzo requerido. Queremos muchas veces identificar eso y también celebrar el esfuerzo. Si el niño no llegó a la meta, pero aplicó y trató, queremos muchas veces identificar, bueno, te esforzaste, vi que trabajaste mucho, trabajaste fuerte, esto te va a ayudar para la próxima vez. Queremos tener esas conversaciones positivas en vez de tantas veces somos tan culpables de tener nuestro enfoque en el resultado, no llegaste aquí, no lo lograste, y eso puede hacer emocionalmente y psicológicamente muy dañino al niño, especialmente durante este tiempo donde tenemos que ser padres con compasión y empatía a nuestro niño, porque nuestros niños también, como nosotros, tenemos mucho estrés y es importante asegurar que nosotros podamos apoyar en vez de ser contribuyentes a ese estrés y a esos pasos. All right. Ahora, this is the last step. I just want to walk you through this quickly. Just bear with me. All right. As I mentioned, I just want to actually now give you something practical, so it's something fun to play with, but that your children are actually going to be a part of. As I mentioned, they're going to be sitting through one of those workshops that they're going to have is a memory workshop, some strategies that they can use to memorize. So I just want to give you a quick little taste as to what your child's going to be a part of, how much fun this learning can actually be, and how they're going to learn how to apply this skill. So I want to walk you through some memory strategies, a quick one. Trust me, it's a lot of fun. You're going to love it. I hope. Quiero hablar de 3 puntos de la memoria rápida, como el niño va a ser parte de nuestros talleres de memoria, aprender algunas estrategias que pueden aplicar a mejorar ese proceso de memoria de una manera divertida, donde el niño está aprendiendo, pero también tiene esa diversión. El primer paso es hacer lo que tiene que memorizar corto. Make it short and sweet. What it is that I need to memorize, what it is that I need to retain. If it's a key word, if it's a phrase, make it nice and short. Instead of a full-on sentence, it's actually something shorter. Making it visual, being able to visualize it, being able to see it, process it. We think with pictures and images in our heads. It's the same thing when we want to retain information. It's much easier to remember pictures rather than words. So hacer esto visual, muchas veces es mucho más fácil retener información si es visual, si lo podemos visualizar. Es mucho más fácil, en vez de tener palabras y números enfrente de nosotros, recordar imágenes. Por eso en el proceso de crear de retener información, queremos crearlo de una manera visual. Y the last one is making it weird. Now, I know that sounds weird, but think about how we remember information. If you see something very strange and odd, that's going to stick out a little bit more. Everybody's wearing red and the one person is wearing blue. That person's going to stick out. It's a little weird. You're not part of the norm, right? So that's the same thing when it comes to retaining information. This is a fun strategy of making it short and sweet, making it visual, and making it odd and strange, because it becomes easier to retain. I'm going to walk you through this, I promise you. Pero la idea es, lo último es hacer la información un poco raro para entender. Si uno lo piensa, las cosas que son medio raras o extranjeras, muchas veces es más fácil a recordar. Y eso es lo mismo, cómo podemos convertir la información académica en una manera rara y extranjera. So, how do we keep it short? Mantenerlo corto. En realidad solamente es usamos 20% de palabras. Si estamos leyendo un texto, solamente el 20% es lo más importante. So we actually only use about 20% of words. If we're reading a paragraph, what we really need to absorb and retain is about 20% of that information. So how do we go about that? We identify these words and key terms as trigger words. They're short and sweet, 1 to 3 words that we need to actually retain. Lo que estamos hablando son estas palabras claves. En vez de tener que leer un párrafo completo y entenderlo, en realidad solamente tengo que recordar algunas palabras que son estas palabras clave. So rather than, memorizing 7 sentences, in reality, it's probably memorizing, a few, 10 keywords, trigger words, which I'll discuss on how to create. But if you think about trigger words, yeah, nice, short, and sweet. Next is making these words visual and making it weird. So, as I said, images are easier to remember. Las imágenes son más fáciles para recordar. ¿Cómo podemos crear estas palabras? So it's like literally taking these keywords, these trigger words, how do I convert them into something visual, something easy to remember in a bizarre, weird story? Bear with me, I'm going to walk you through it, trust me. Pero es cómo podemos tener estas palabras clave, convertirlas en imágenes fácil para recordar en una historia extraña o rara. Ese es el proceso. Your children will learn this process, how to do this effectively. Los niños van a aprender a cómo hacer y construir este método. Now, I'm going to show you, it's called the visual journey. This is a key strategy. In fact, people that compete to memorize, the most numbers use this same exact strategy. Muchas veces el niño, esta estrategia que le voy a hacer se llama el paseo. Es algo visual y el primer paso es identificar las palabras, right? Las palabras claves. Elegir esas palabras, pick those keywords, identify which are the keywords that I need to memorize, for my test, for my quiz, whatever that looks like. Lo segundo es conectarlo con un objeto, algo físico, un objeto que se puede recordar. Turn them into an object specifically, something I could remember, something tangible, like a pen, for instance. Put that pen in a familiar place. Colocar esta palabra que hemos convertido en un objeto en un lugar familiar, algo que conocemos. Many of us know the layout of our apartment, for instance. Sabemos cómo nuestro apartamento está el baño, la cocina, el comedor. We know the layout. Maybe it's colocando ese objeto in that room because we can visualize that. We know exactly what our apartment looks like. We know there's a pen on the living room, whatever that might be. Últimamente, es crear una historia con todo lo que hemos colocado usando estos términos. Last thing is making an odd visual story for ourselves. So we're thinking, where did the pen go? Where did I put the water bottle? Oh, it's in the room. And creating it. Trust me, I'm going to walk you through it. I just wanted to give you some context, some theory behind it. This is all about semantic learning, taking information and putting context that we already know and applying it to different things that we don't necessarily know. When we can do that, it makes things much easier to memorize. Si podemos, esto es el aprendizaje semántico donde tenemos información que sabemos que es los objetos, mi casa, mi hogar, y conectándolo a contextos que no son muy familiar. So, let's get into it. Let's give me 5 more minutes. It's a fun way to just show you and prove to you how fun this can actually be. So I'm going to narrate a story. I'm going to tell you a story. Just want you to pay attention to the story. I'm going to give you some visuals. You can see it there as well. And you're going to actually realize, I want you to try to memorize what we just said. So here goes. I'm going to do it in English first, then I'll say a story in Spanish. Voy a decir la historia primeramente en inglés y después una historia similar en español para probar qué fácil y qué divertido este proceso puede ser. So let's go. Now, first thing, you're walking towards your door, your front door, and there's a bunch of Connect 4, little pieces of Connect 4 that you step on. So at your front door, there's a bunch of Connect 4, you step on them. Now you walk towards the living room, and on your couch, you take a seat, and there's a pen that's poking through the fabric of the couch. And it pokes you on the side of your leg. So you have the couch, you have the pen piercing through the fabric. Next, we have a Dell laptop on the dining table. And it's ding, ding, ding. It's ringing. It's going like crazy. Your Dell laptop is on the table and you're trying to fix it, but you get hungry. So you go to the kitchen. In the refrigerator, there's a piece of ham, a big ham. That's all there is, ham. All right, so in the fridge, there's ham. Now you walk towards the hallway and there's a big portrait of the Virgin Mary. All right, the Virgin Mary, huge, bright colors, Virgin Mary in your hallway. And you walk by your hallway, now you're entering your room and your bedroom. In the closet, you open it up, and there's nothing but jerseys. All jerseys, all types of sports, all types of jerseys. You put one on, and you hear someone singing in the backyard. And guess who is singing in the backyard? It's Curious George. So in your backyard, there's Curious George. What is he doing there? So, story doesn't make too much sense. A little odd, bizarre. The ham, the Virgin Mary, Curious George, Connect Four. But in reality, I want you to now think about these words. Think about where we place them. Now, I want you to think about that. Try to remember everything that I kind of walked you through. In reality, one of the steps that we just did, this actually discusses 8 of the original 13 U.S. colonies. So let me just bring that to you. So the door, the Connect Four, Connect represents Connecticut. All right. Oh, my daughter loves this activity. She does these all the time. So the pen represents Pennsylvania. Pen on the couch, Pennsylvania. The Dell, remember we said a Dell laptop on the table. Dell, Delaware. You have the ham in the fridge, New Hampshire. Virgin Mary actually serves for 2 states, Virginia and Maryland. You have in the closet jerseys, remember the jerseys. You have New Jersey. And Curious George is the state of Georgia in the backyard. So we walk the students through this activity, how to apply this activity when you have a bunch of content, if it is states, let's say, or countries, whatever that might look like, is mapping that out, how to do that effectively, how to study, how to memorize this information. All right, now, en español. So, tengo una historia, les voy a contar esta historia, simplemente tienen que prestar atención y ver cómo se aplica. Ahora, hay una casa que está hacia la costa. Una casa está a la costa, ¿ok? Ahora entramos a la casa y abrimos la puerta. O sea, abrimos la puerta, hay un hombre rico ahí, a la puerta. En la puerta hay un hombre rico, ¿ok? Tenemos la casa a la costa, abrimos la puerta, hay un hombre rico ahí y quiere jugar dominós en la sala. So, en la sala quiere jugar en la mesa de dominó. Y pide un cigarro en el gabinete. Uno de esos cigarros cubanos. So, va al gabinete, abre y agarra un cigarro. Ahora entra a la cocina, tiene hambre y escucha a tu tía decir, ven, por favor, ven. Pues el hombre camina hacia el pasillo y hay una foto, una imagen de Jesús donde dice El Salvador. Jesús nuestro Salvador. Una imagen ahí. Ahora a la cocina, a entrar a la mesa hay muchos tacos. A la mesa hay tacos, me encantan los tacos. Al pastor, vamos a decir, hay tacos al pastor ahí. Entra a la nevera, quiere más chiles a añadir, agarra la nevera y entra el chile. Y al final quiere usar el baño y hay pan por todos los lados en el baño. Uno no entiende por qué, la toalla es hecha de pan, no tiene sentido. El hombre rico se va y agarra un paraguas hacia el patio porque comienza a llover. Ahora, sé la historia no tiene mucho sentido, es un poco extraño, pero quiero que piensen en eso, las imágenes, la casa a la costa, la puerta, los dominós, porque en realidad, si uno puede utilizar y crear una historia así, en realidad estamos pensando en algunos países latinoamericanos. La casa a la costa representa Costa Rica, el hombre rico a la puerta, Puerto Rico, dominó, República Dominicana, los cigarros cubanos, recuerda, en el gabinete Cuba, ven, que representa Venezuela. Recuérdese que abajo de la imagen de Jesús dijo El Salvador, representa el país. Los tacos, claro, mexicanos, que tenemos que darle el crédito ahí. Chile, el pan en el baño, el pan, Panamá, y el paraguas, Paraguay. Esta es una actividad que hacemos con nuestros niños. Aprenden a cómo utilizar este método, esta estrategia para memorizar y grabar información que la escuela requiere. Pues unos consejos adicionales aquí. No siempre va a trabajar para todos los... it's in English. Whoa, look at me bilingual there. You don't have to use the journey for everything. It's not going to be as effective, but it does make it easier if you are taking effective notes, where you can identify these key words, these key phrases, the trigger words, and then mapping it out on a paper. Now, I did it with pictures and images. I encourage the child to also do something very similar because that's going to help visualize it all out and mapping it out. unos consejos adicionales es que no todo, esta estrategia no va a funcionar en todo, no va a poder memorizar toda esta información utilizando este método, pero se hace mucho más fácil si tomamos notas efectivas a identificar algunas palabras claves y al final es fácil para poder planear todo en un papel y organizarse, a lo mejor con imágenes y fotos como yo hice en el papel primero. Bueno, como le dije, el niño va a aprender esta estrategia. Your child's going to learn this strategy with us. Hopefully they'll have a lot of fun, but also really learn how to apply it. Ahora, antes de comenzar las preguntas, before question and answer, I just want to say, hopefully this was useful to you. The idea is, what can we as parents really do to create some new structure in the home while my child's learning from home? What are certain habits I can help facilitate and help change and help create that healthy, conducive learning environment for my kid? We have a role as parents. Now, sometimes we might see ourselves as parents and as teachers and as guidance counselors. But the idea is, what can I be doing to take a more intentional role in my child's learning? Now that I'm going to be with them most of the time. Ahora, como padre, el deber es cómo nosotros podemos ayudar, crear alguna estructura, ser más intencional al ayudar a mi niño a poder lograr académicamente. ¿Qué yo puedo hacer para crear estas rutinas, estos nuevos hábitos que va a ayudar, como dije, académicamente a enfocar? No podemos hacer todo, pero muchas veces ahora más que nunca somos padres, maestros, consejeros. So yo tengo que tomar un desempeño, un rol más intencional cuando se requiere a la idea académica. Pues ahora vamos a ver si hay algunas preguntas. A ver, se lo voy a poner en inglés y en español. So, very quickly, a couple of questions. My child says listening to music while they study helps with the concentration, but I'm not so sure. Any advice? Yeah, we just discussed that, as I mentioned. Mi niño, aquí la pregunta es que mi niño dice que al escuchar música le ayuda a concentrar. No estoy tan seguro, tengo aviso. Yeah, I would advise, to be honest, is the idea of having this conversation. Like, look, I understand that music might help you, might block out distractions from the outside, but what we're actually doing is introducing a new distraction. Again, I mentioned music specifically that has a lot of lyrics and a lot of words will actually it's actually going to elongate the process of learning and retaining information. You can literally test them. There's studies that actually shown that where I even encourage do something similar. You could even test them in a fun way. Try to remember these words while listening to music with words, then do it without. That could be a fun way to just prove that it is much more effective without. But there are certain music, certain sounds, as I mentioned, background noise that can actually be of benefit. You go on YouTube, there's study music, perfectly okay to use that. In fact, many teachers that I've worked with use that as well in the classroom. They'll have certain background noises and music that can actually help concentrate and maintain productivity. So, muchos niños, la pregunta, como le dije anterior, queremos asegurar que la música no tenga muchas líricas y palabras, porque eso en realidad puede ser, no puede impactar y interrumpirnos más que otra cosa. Let's see. My child uses the laptop a lot to study, but how do I know they're not distracting sites? Algunos redes que pueden distraer al niño, ¿cómo yo puedo saber que la laptop no está impactando? And that's true. There are certain things, but there are also certain apps that we can actually download. For instance, one of them could be one of the ones that I know is called Hour Packed. And it's actually, they have a free service, Hour Pack, like a pact between two people. And you can actually block out certain applications, certain websites, certain social media platforms, and you can actually block them out of it. Obviously it's going to take some commitment between both, but the idea is if we've agreed, this is the time I'm going to study, this is the time that we shouldn't have these distractions. For instance, another app is Cold Turkey, if I believe, goturkey.com, and that helps. Again, you can identify certain times as to when we've agreed. You going back to that study schedule that we discussed, one of the times that I've agreed I'm going to study, because you can enter those times into that website, and they'll actually block you out of certain sites, which is pretty cool. It's just that self-regulation. Algunas aplicaciones que podemos descargar que nos puede ayudar a bloquear algunos otros sitios, otros redes sociales donde podemos entrar, que puede ayudarnos. Si cualquier cosa nos puede preguntar y le puedo enviar alguna información. We could send you some of that information. We could even respond to you directly within the chat. Now let's see. Another question. Okay, great. Yeah, that seems about it. Well, I'm very grateful to be sharing with you here. Hopefully, this was of great benefit to you and your school community and your children. Again, I hope you start really thinking about what can I do as a parent to be a little bit more active and intentional with my child's study habits and study routines. Once again, it's been a true pleasure. Ha sido un gran placer. Otra vez le animo, por favor, de comenzar a tratar de pensar de una manera más intencional de qué yo como padre puedo comenzar a hacer, qué es algo que yo puedo cambiar en mi rutina, en mis hábitos para asegurar que mis niños tengan buen hábitos al estudiar y cómo podemos normalizar este proceso de estructura, de buen hábitos. Les doy muchas gracias, ha sido un placer y espero escuchar de ustedes pronto. Otra vez, mi nombre es Tabel Reyes, ha sido un placer. Again, my name is Tabel Reyes and it's been a